Hello, marine biology students. In this video, we're going to talk about coral reefs. Corals are cnidarians. Which are characterized by the presence of stinging cells, known as nematocysts. Which are found on their tentacles. They are related to jellyfish. In a coral, the coral polyp secretes a calcium carbonate skeleton, and this builds up over time and over many generations, growing the coral colony. Most reef-building corals are colonial, meaning they are interconnected polyps that develop asexually from a single polyp. Two of the major categories when it comes to corals are the hermatypic corals, which are reef-building, and the ahermatypic, which do not build reefs. So again, the hermatypic corals are reef builders, whereas the ahermatypic are not. The hermatypic corals will contain zooxanthellae. These are symbiotic photosynthetic dinoflagellates. A type of phytoplankton. The ahermatypic corals may or may not have these zooxanthellae. Hermatypic corals will be tropical in distribution, meaning you'll find them in warm and shallow waters, whereas some of the ahermatypic corals can actually be found in cold, deep water. These are some of the categorizations within the corals. In coral nutrition, the coral zooxanthellae produce organic matter through photosynthesis. Some of this organic matter is passed on to the coral polyp itself. The zooxanthellae can also help in the deposition of calcium carbonate, making the foundation that the polyp lives on. Not only do coral polyps get some of the photosynthetic product from the zooxanthellae, but they can also feed on prey, aided by the nematocysts. In their tentacles, there's some debate as to whether the coral polyps might not be collecting zooplankton to provide nutrients for the zooxanthellae to allow them to photosynthesize more. Corals are also able to feed by using extensions of the gut wall, called mesenterial filaments. These filaments can secrete digestive enzymes and can be extruded through the mouth into surrounding areas. This allows the coral to feed and digest food outside of the body. And as we'll see in our next video, this can also be a form of defense in competing with neighboring corals. For a coral reef to grow, a few conditions have to be met. There initially needs to be a hard substrate. For settlement of the first larvae and polyps of the colony, there needs to be light for the zooxanthellae. There's a narrow temperature range at which reef formation occurs. There's also a narrow salinity range. There can't be a lot of sediments in the water, and there can't be a lot of pollution either. Corals are very sensitive marine organisms. In the diagram, we see after the initial hard substrate, there ends up being loose sediment and coral rubble that begins to accumulate on the bottom. Other reef organisms and the coral themselves can actually consolidate that sediment and that increases the overall height of the reef, allowing the reef to grow taller. Corals reproduce both sexually and asexually. The asexual reproduction allows for the growth of a colony of polyps from a single polyp, whereas the sexual reproduction results in the release of planktonic planula larvae, which is motile and can disperse into a new location. The mass spawning of planula often occur at the same time in some coral reefs, and often this is synchronized by the moon. When we talk about the reef building or hermatypic coral, these corals are very sensitive to temperature. They tolerate only a low temperature range compared to most marine organisms. They are limited by cold currents and they cannot survive and travel through them. Coral can only reproduce and grow if water temperatures are over 20 degrees centigrade or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Higher water temperatures are preferred for optimal growth. But there is an upper limit as well. Temperatures above 30 to 35 degrees centigrade cause coral stress. Coral stress can lead to bleaching, an expulsion of zooxanthellae from the coral polyp. When we look at the temperatures which promote coral growth, we can see it's warm water currents which allow corals to be deposited and distributed to other areas. The cold currents prevent the transfer of corals. Now, the expulsion of zooxanthellae is called bleaching because the normally colored coral is bleached white after expulsion. Without the zooxanthellae, the coral is mostly translucent, and the white color you see is the calcium carbonate skeleton below it. Zooxanthellae are what give corals their distinctive colors. Other events besides high temperatures can cause coral bleaching, such as poor water quality, increased sediment in the water, wave stress, or disease. If a coral remains bleached for too long, it could result in death of the coral. But coral bleaching does not always result in coral death. These corals can reacquire zooxanthellae from the environment, and it's believed that some zooxanthellae have greater temperature ranges and tolerances. So it could be that coral bleaching is actually a mechanism in which the coral is attempting to get zooxanthellae that will be better suited to the higher temperature. Widespread bleaching often occurs as a result of events such as El Niño, which is a change in the circulation patterns of the upper ocean and can bring warmer waters to more areas. Other requirements of coral reef building is that corals do not normally occur in areas where rivers deliver large amounts of fresh water because they have very narrow salinity tolerances. Low salinity can result in coral bleaching as well. Rivers also usually bring with them suspended sediments, which can be detrimental to the coral if they settle on them and reduce the water clarity, which reduces access to sunlight needed for photosynthesis. By the zooxanthellae. High wave action can also increase the amount of suspended sediment limiting the formation of coral reefs. We have come to find that even low levels of pollution can kill coral polyps. high nutrient runoff levels from land can also allow seaweeds to grow and take over. Increased seaweed growth shades the light-sensitive coral. And there's zooxanthellae. Now this photo is taken from Kaneohe Bay in Hawaii. The Kaneohe Bay coral reef has had several challenges within the past few decades of humans encroaching and living closer on this shore. The history of this bay is recorded in our textbook and definitely something worth reading. Coral colonies can come in a variety of shapes and sizes, with different species of coral generating different colony shapes. Taller, more branching corals tend to be more common in shallower areas of the reef due to intense competition. For space and light. This is also why high-rise skyscrapers and apartment buildings are more common in areas where a lot of humans are living, because there's more competition for space. Flatter forms of coral tend to be more common in deeper areas of the reef, and yet they need to be larger to help catch more light in that deeper area. Corals aren't the only organisms contributing to the calcium carbonate of the reef as well. There are calcareous green algae and coralline algae that are also producing calcium carbonate. These algae can also function to cement sediments together by encrusting over them, adding to the bulk of the reef. There are some other cnidarians, such as hydrozoans, that can produce a calcium carbonate skeleton that might also contribute to reef formation. Even sponges can play a role in cementing the coral rubble together into a solid substrate. Also, bryozoans which are colonial lithophorates. They can end up contributing their calcium carbonate tests to the sediments as well. All of these can be combined together to allow the reef to grow taller and taller. So that completes our introduction to coral reefs. Before our next video, I would like for you to think about what it would be like to compete with many other individuals for limited resources. We'll talk about that. See you in the next video.